Welcome to the Uncommon Senses podcast. In this special series, Sustainability, where we spill the tea on sustainability, we will discuss issues that centers around the environment and human development, specifically companies, technologies, policies, and individuals. In this series, we have a special co-host, Ms. Lianna. She is currently pursuing a major in sociology and global sustainable development in the University of Warwick. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, so just now, I guess we looked at we mostly focused on some non-renewable sources, and now I feel like we can dive into some details for the renewables. And I picked two, one is solar and another one is wind. And I picked solar and wind because personally I'm very interested in them, and I think they're gonna be like the future. Also kind of touch upon nuclear energy because it's very controversial, and I think we can talk a lot about, the things revolving around nuclear energy. Is it renewable or is it, an alternative energy resource? But yeah, first let's have a look at solar energy. It's pretty cool, honestly, the invention of solar panels. So essentially, the sun provides us with a large amount of energy. It provides us 1,360 watt per meter squared of energy in a direct insolation. So like at the equator, that's the amount of energy you can get. 1,360 watts per meter squared. And to compare this number, let's use like LED light bulb. So a typical LED light bulb consumes 15 watts of power. So hypothetically, if we use the power of sun with 100% efficiency, 1 square meter of sunlight could light up 90 LED light bulbs. However, this is at the equator, and for a particular region, the insolation might be at a different angle, like for higher latitudes like the UK, and also like places with different seasons. The insolation from the sun will vary. And there's no way that the sun shines with like the same intensity throughout the entire day because we have night times. And also another thing is for a solar panel, we cannot harvest 100% of that energy. And there's no way a system can have 100% efficiency. And there are quite a few types of ways to harvest solar energy. And the first one is photovoltaic cells, which is basically your typical solar panels. They use semiconductors, typically from silicon, which allows electrons to flow freely. And when electrons flow, that's how you generate electricity. And the second type is a solar energy power tower, where the heat of a solar energy is concentrated to a tower with thousands of movable mirrors. So there's a lot of mirrors in one plane, and then the sun shines on the mirrors. The mirrors reflected to basically a single point on a tower that contains a fluid, such as oil, and it heats up that fluid to drive a steam turbine. Yeah, that's very different from the photovoltaic cells. That's kind of concentrating your solar energy, I guess. And another kind, so third kind is solar water heaters, which heats up water in a tube, and the hot water in the tube is used to heat up the water for showering and stuff. So basically, there are so many different types of the ways which we can harvest solar energy. And I think we can talk about, solar panels because it is a very, heated technology that's been developing for quite a few decades. So previously I've mentioned about how the efficiency of solar panels are low. There is actually two guys, Shockley and Quasier. In 1961, they proposed a theoretical limit for a standard single junction solar panel without concentrators. For this typical single junction solar panel, the efficiency limit is 31%, so it cannot exceed 31%. And yeah, basically, from my understanding, this junction thing refers to the PN junction, which basically describes the two different materials in the semiconductor. They're also so that's one, the single junction solar panels, and then there's also something called these thin film panels. So these thin film solar panels are very light and flexible, with layers 300 times thinner than standard silicon, and they have an efficiency of around 20%. So these thin film panels are your typical solar panels. I think kind of really popular solar panels out there. But then there's also new technology such as multi-junction solar panels, and they could potentially have a much higher efficiency. Triple junction solar panels limit efficiency level is up to 50%. And there's also a lot more different kinds of solar panels. And the one that I find the coolest is transparent solar panels. So these transparent solar panels can potentially be attached on windows or even replacing windows. And I think they're still in the development stage, but I hope they're going to become available because I think it's going to be super cool to harvest solar energy from your windows. And yeah, that's why I feel like I'm very interested in solar panels, because it seems like the possibilities are endless. But then there also exists a myth, which is also a question that I had in mind before, that I was just thinking maybe the energy used to manufacture a solar panel can perhaps outweigh the energy produced by a solar panel in their lifetime. Because when you're producing a solar panel, you need a lot of energy. However, that is only a myth because there's a study by National Renewable Energy Laboratory. They have demonstrated that for the energy payback for a photovoltaic solar panel is generally less than 4 years, and typically a PV solar panel could last for 30 years. So this is just, some, I guess, fun facts about solar panels. There's this question that I want to ask you guys, which I think is kind of fun. And Joshua mentioned a little bit about how solar panels can affect the climate. And the next question is kind of related to that. So yeah, I think at some point we all have this moment where we're thinking like, wait, what if we cover the Sahara Desert with solar panels? Are we able to harvest a lot of energy? And yeah, actually, some people did calculate that if 1.2% of the desert, which is around 110,000 square kilometers of the desert is covered with solar panels, like it actually would be enough to satisfy the entire world's energy needs. So just kind of a weird question to ask, but like, will you guys support this initiative?
1.2% is a lot low, like a lot less than I would expect.
Yeah.
I don't know, because we talk about environmental sustainability. It's not just about global warming, climate
Mm,
change, but there's also like biodiversity and land use
mm,
change. So I don't
sure.
know. Like I guess we have to consider the desert as a
Mm,
biome, like how that's going to
mm,
affect the desert itself. And
yeah.
also there are people living in the desert, so how's that going to
Mm,
affect
Yeah, definitely. And I guess another point to consider is that because as you mentioned, like solar panels, they're not exactly the most efficient, way
mm,
of which we harvest energy. And I think there's a video on YouTube you can
mm,
look at which explains how as you've mentioned how solar panel works is that photons get comes in
mm,
contact with the panel, and if they arrive at like a correct orientation or like a correct kind of like momentum, they're able
mm,
to turn that proton into storable energy or like
mm,
but because of how a solar panel is positioned and also how like the sunlight works, a lot of those rays and a lot of those photons actually gets reflected back into the atmosphere.
mm,
So and when they get reflected back, they don't reflect back as like light energy but rather as heat.
mm,
So some people has argued that how a way of which solar panels can change the surrounding climate is that they can really heat up the Sahara Desert. And
mm.
some people will be like, Sahara Desert is already very hot. Why does it matter if we increase the temperature by 1 or 2%?
Yeah.
And the same video kind of talks about how the increase of temperature can change the wind pattern of our
Mm,
of our Earth, because as you know, our climate is a very complicated system and it requires different factors to work together. And apparently due to the kind of increase of temperature and also like changing of the pressure system, um an effect of that was will be like there won't be any wind coming from the Sahara Desert to like the Amazon, which is like it kind of blows past the
mm,
ocean. And without sand getting blown to the Amazon, it is predicted that there won't be like fertile soil and nutrients to sustain our the Amazon forest, which as we know
mm,
is the lungs of the earth. So I guess be it's not to say that this idea is undoable, but I think that a lot of thought just has to be put into it. There will have to be consultation with like environmental scientists and working with like different governments and different
Mm.
people with different expertise, because as you mentioned, like this kind of project is a huge undertaking, and perhaps it will take like probably decades or even centuries to achieve. So like
Mm.
I think well, although it seems like a really nice idea and it seems really promising, I think we also have to approach these kind of ideas with like caution and with reasonable skepticism.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think you have more points than what I prepared for. And yeah, it's genuinely there's so much more that can happen when you install these solar panels, because the one that I found is about albedo. So IB geography, Lianna, we know this. It kind of describes, how reflective the Earth's surface is. When you have like a more reflective surface, like a white surface, then that means it has a higher albedo. When it's a black surface, it absorbs light. That means you have a lower albedo. Yeah. So because these solar panels, you can tell that they are kind of like bluish, dark blue color. So their albedo is very low compared with the sand. So then you are kind of it's less reflective. So you reflect less light back to the atmosphere, and you're just kind of absorbing the heat and trapping it in the Earth's atmosphere. And that itself can, intensify global warming in a sense. So there, I guess, just with any kind of technology, there is so much things that we need to consider about. And also we need some actual data statistics to simulations to support our argument. And yeah, I think that's basically my findings about solar panels. And another fun fact is that HKUST has the largest scale solar panel system in Hong Kong, which is pretty cool. We installed them in like student halls, like on the roof of student halls. And
Yeah.
thank you, UST. You guys are doing great. Yeah, and before it was like before we didn't have a sustainability office. It was like a department. And in recent years we are like an office now, which is really cool that we're focusing on that.
Oh.
So next I want to move on to wind energy. Location-wise, these wind energy are installed at high mountains without anything blocking it. So you don't install it at places where there are buildings, or you can install them offshore, so in the sea. In the sea, there's also more wind, like the winds are stronger as well. And then I also found there are a lot of very creative ways to generate energy from wind, such as a kite-powered system. So the kite-powered system, basically it happens where like there's a rotor connected to the kite, and when the kite flies out through the air, the rotor turns and generates electricity. And okay, a huge argument against wind energy is its disruption to our wildlife, specifically birds. And studies have found that in the US, the average annual bird fatality caused by collision with a wind turbine is around 234,000 to 573,000 each year. And like, honestly, the number seems like a lot. Like, there's a lot of birds being killed by that. However, if you compare it with the numbers of birds that outdoor cats kill every year in the US, which is 2.4 billion, then I just want to make this point, like, what, 234,000 versus 2.4 billion. I don't see people coming out after cats and be like, you guys, what are you guys doing? Stop eating this bird. So yeah, I feel like, what do you guys feel about that information? Have you guys thought about that?
I mean, it's the same with planes, right? Like birds get killed by plane engines and things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, planes are generating carbon emissions, so
Yeah.
and I guess it just depends on like where you're building it.
Yeah, and I guess it's just this sort of like narrative that has been commonly used by like I guess political parties or even like people who opposes wind turbines near their house. It's just that they find these sort of reasoning to just oppose I guess wind turbines in general because perhaps they don't want one built near their homes or like they have other ulterior motive. And it's these sort of myths are so successful in the sense that, the first thing you think about, be it wind energy, solar energy, or other types of perhaps like other types of renewable energy, the first thing that comes to mind is, how bad they can be and how like it can sometimes be counterintuitively,
Mm-hmm.
bad for the environment. And yeah, and I guess like the numbers doesn't lie. So like um wind energy as you mentioned, like wind energy doesn't really have like a big impact on how birds migrate, like contrary to popular belief. Like
Mm-hmm.
I even believed in this like myth like before you mentioned this. And yeah, and I also think that like I don't think wind turbines have like a major effect on our like climate, at least like not that I know of,
Compared
like
with cats.
how it can, yeah, compared to cats, or like how it can change like temperature and wind patterns. I don't think they have that sort of
Mm.
impact.
Hmm.
So I think perhaps the main concern about wind turbines is just where we place them, because like as you
Mm.
mentioned, wind turbines can be placed in places of like near the sea and perhaps like near a mountaintop. So perhaps it can destroy like the scenery. People think it looks ugly, or like
Mm.
these ports and these places could be used as other things, other
Yeah.
than winter places where you place wind turbines. So perhaps in terms of opportunity cost, it can really um has some economic impacts and so on. But I think in general, compared to other sources of renewable energy, like I don't think the wind turbines really affects the like adversely it affects the environment that much. I think more of the
Mm.
argument is to made in terms of its efficiency, how economic it is, and also like how reliable it is. Because
Mm.
I guess as of right now, it's hard to find a source of energy, like a sort of renewable energy that is both like environmentally safe, it's safe, environmentally friendly, and also like reliable. I think it's
Mm.
very hard to find that sweet spot in between.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. And also, I guess also how much the efficiency of these renewable resources is also a question to ask. Yeah, I guess the cat analogy just tells us to just keep your cats indoors. Don't let them loose. And yeah, I guess just another point on one last point on wind energy or any kind of, renewable energy is that if you look at, how the supply demand of renewable energy are in the current situation, China has been leading the world in terms of renewable energy production. So, like, I do have a question. Like, as a large part of China's GDP comes from the secondary sector, like it's around 40.5% from secondary industry in 2017, which that basically means it will ultimately create a large amount of pollution as well as greenhouse gases. So what are your point of views towards like perhaps some countries' stance that, industrialized countries should be more responsible for the pollution that they're causing? I guess the some country stance I refer to some developed country stance, saying that, industrializing countries, you guys should take up more responsibility and control that carbon emission. So what's your views on that?
Wait, they're saying that countries that are industrializing, like as in countries that are transitioning from LEDCs to MEDCs, like they should be
Yeah.
more responsible for the pollution they produce.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting standpoint, because like quite often I hear the argument saying that MEDCs should be like given the greater responsibility, because industrializing
Oh.
economies are they're still developing. They should be given the opportunity to kind of pollute for a little, so to speak, to like catch up. Like yeah, and yeah, I guess it just reminds me of this saying that my professor said in class, which I find really like interesting. He says he said that, people often say, oh, how, how China is like polluting and how like, it's doing, this and that. But uh, we have to keep in mind that, for hundreds of years, Western nations are able to like freely pollute, freely industrialize, like during the Industrial Revolution. And so like can't we just, give the same time for like these industrializing nations to kind of do the same? Like, why should you have the moral high ground and to
Mm,
condemn other
Mm,
countries when you yourself were the first to like pollute and to like create this problem in the first place? So, yeah, I just think it's a very interesting argument
yeah.
about like, who's responsible. But personally speaking,
Mm,
I don't think we should be like finger pointing at this point of time. I think we should just all work together um
mm,
to achieve like you know perhaps like a non-polluting way to like develop our economies. But yeah, I guess that's kind of idealistic and um yeah, I'm not sure if it can be achieved in real life, seeing that there are so many like geopolitical tensions and people caring about their self-interest. It's really
mm,
hard to do that, I guess, in real life.
mm,
and it's also about like the whole supply chain, right? Like manufacturing
mm.
and factories
Yeah.
are just a part of that. So things are produced, like things that are produced are demanded and imported by so-called
Mm.
developed countries.
Yeah.
So you can't just like point the finger at them.
Yeah, I agree. Also, with climate change, the countries that are vulnerable are those who are like less developed, and they don't have the methods to, um, cope with any climate disasters. Also, this whole idea of, environmental protection slash sustainability, I do think that to some extent is a very MEDC problem. I'm not gonna lie, because if you're on LEDC, I guess you have more issues that involve like the well-being of humans to really take care of than the environment, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, which like leads me to a kind of scenario. I kind of want to ask you guys because I'm very interested to see what you guys think. So like
Mhm.
in the Matrix, they actually like found a way for like they have this scenario where they extract energy from human bodies. Do you think,
Mm,
if this technology is available, do you think society should use it if it's able to save our environment? I mean, some people could argue that, even though it seems really unethical, some people could argue that, oh, we're just, it's just humans serving humans, so we're able to contain the problem within our own species instead of like, exploiting other species for, our own economic gain. So what do you guys think? Should we use this kind of technology if it's available?
How exactly does it work though? Like extracting energy from.
So like I'm not sure, I don't think the I forgot what the Matrix said, but like I remember like our old English teacher, Mr. Sid, he thought of a
yeah.
scenario where like how humans are powered by like mitochondria, right? So like an idea would be like to have these microchips and like kind of placed within our mitochondria. So on a cellular level, they kind of like extract our energy. And like, it makes people really tired, it makes people like fatigue, and you have all sort of problems. But they're able to produce these, huge facet of energy that, you know, could otherwise, be saving our environmental problems that comes from energy generation.
Mm. Wait, but it makes us tired, and you get all this energy. Then who's going to use that energy? Like we're not going to do anything that needs the energy, right? Like if we're so tired.
I guess the ones are
Right?
reaching out.
I guess it's a win-win situation, right? It reduces our energy usage and also generates energy. So it's a good propos. It's like I guess like in a
Oh,
kind of crazy sense, it's a
oh,
workable proposal.
well, I was
I'm
thinking
very
something.
skeptical of this, so it's really hard to imagine
Yeah.
like
Mm,
what I'll actually think about it if it's an actual technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
true.
That's very true. And the entire like point why I want to bring up this scenario is that I just want
Mm,
to kind of touch upon the conflict between humans, like human rights and human comfort, and also like saving the
Mm.
environment, should we go for a more anthrocentric approach where we put ourselves first, or should we go on like a more ecocentric approach where we put our earth and nature first? So I guess there's always this kind of struggle, and which makes the subject you're pursuing, like
Yeah.
sustainable development, and um all the kind of discussions about climate, so important, and so like such a fascinating subject to kind of like discuss and to research upon.
I think that wouldn't like that's a very extreme example, like using
Yeah.
actually sacrificing our energy. But then
Eh,
it's still relevant
Mm.
like it exists, right? Like even with just moving away from fossil fuels, like this is
Mm.
a debate that happens all the time. Like how much should I change my habits
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
for the
Remember, like there's this essay where it's called, like, I forgot, it's like a modest proposal. I don't know if you guys remember, where it's like I'm eating people's babies, and I don't know, maybe you can write an like it's a satirical essay about how we could solve society's problem by I guess killing the babies of those who are poor.
Oh,
I guess in the
that's
future
good.
write like a similar essay talking about
The
how we solve
dystopian story.
yeah
It's
we
fiction.
solve energy
Wow.
usage by just powering it off of humans.
Thanks for introducing that idea, Joshua. Let's move
Yes.
on.
Wait. Actually, like about the renew. Wait, what was it? Like the blaming developing countries, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
China specifically. Like just look
Mm.
up claims that Trump has said
Oh, yeah.
about China. And the thing is, like, we can laugh about it and say how illogical it is, but
Mm.
we also have to admit that he does have quite a high level of influence within the US, but also globally, and also
Mm.
in terms of how climate change is dealt with internationally. Like, he pulled out of the Paris Agreement because it's taking away
Mm.
American jobs. And yeah, so
Oh, wait. Yeah, that's such a good point. These public figures, how, and also just now we talked about plastic recycling, all of these advocacies done by, people that have, or organizations, institutions that have a high influence over people. Like, how, how should we deal with this? Like, okay, Trump, like, I guess you're free to say whatever you want, but then um, should you also be held accountable for everything that you've said and everything you've commented? So, yeah, that's very interesting. And honestly, I want to talk about this more in this next segment, which I want to discuss, which is nuclear energy. Um, because there is also quite an influential person that talked about, their views towards nuclear energy in the UK. So yeah, nuclear energy, I guess we're no strangers to this type of energy. It's caused by nuclear fission of uranium or plutonium isotopes, which would trigger off a chain reaction, and the nuclear power plant could generate a large amount of energy. And also with this kind of energy, no direct CO2 emissions is generated. And despite the money it takes to build a nuclear power plant, as well as decommissioning a power plant that has been used for so long, safety is also a concern in this type of alternative energy. And as of right now, there isn't a best solution for disposing the spent fuels of radioactive waste. And there has been multiple core melt accidents like Chernobyl, Fukushima, etc. There has been quite a number of them in the past history. And a research by Professor Thomas Rose and Trevor Sweeting suggested that within the next 10 years, the probability of a core melt accident in a world with 443 reactors is 69.8%. So that sounds like there's a high probability that there might be a core melt accident of nuclear power plants. And I will link their paper in the description. And then, yeah, for as of right now in the world currently, we have 437 operable power plants, in the world. And a breakdown of nuclear power plants could cause serious long-term health problems in living organisms. However, Professor David McKay, the author of the book Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air, and not gonna lie, this book and this particular professor inspired me a lot in this sustainability series and also my interest in sustainability. And yeah, Professor David McKay has said that please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be pro-nuclear or anti-wind. I'm just pro-arithmetic. So yeah, he is saying that people, he basically argued how unrealistic it is that in the UK, to have zero carbon solutions that solely rely on solar, wind, and biomass energy, as he argued that if UK only rely on these, will cost too much money and land. And nuclear, with promising energy efficiency, is a more feasible solution for the UK. And however, David McKay did mention that solar energy is great for sunny and hot nations. And he also feel like electric cars are also a great new technology for the future. And I will also attach this article in the description below. But I just honestly want to ask you guys about your views on nuclear energy. Are you guys willing to kind of risk your health and safety for, a very promising and highly efficient power source? What do you guys think?
I think there's it's not just about the actual risk of a meltdown, but it's also like perceived risk. And I know there's generally speaking, I think not a lot of people are that comfortable with having nuclear energy. So I don't know, maybe it's not up to me.
Yeah, I think statistically speaking, more people die every year in a coal mine, from getting
Oh,
coal than like dying from a nuclear meltdown because nuclear meltdowns are
interesting.
extremely rare in like probability.
Mm.
But another argument is that when it's kind of like a plane crash, right? When they do like happen, it affects like an area
Mm.
permanently. You can't return to the area, and affects like the entire like global food supply or like our global climate. So
Mm.
um yeah, it's definitely a very, controversial topic. And I guess there's also the other arguments, in terms of NIMBY, so like not in my backyard kind of point of view, where people are like, oh, we want to
Yeah.
have nuclear energy because it's reliable, it's more, it's perceived to be more environmentally friendly, which, it's another sort of argument because with like, nuclear waste and all that kind of stuff. But
Mm.
like, but then people are like, oh, I want to have its benefits, or like, but then I don't want it to be near my home because,
Mm.
in case anything happens, I don't want that to affect my friends, my families, and, my homeland. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a very complicated topic, and I guess, like Lianna said, I don't think it's really up to me to like make these decisions because I think it's a very like it's a public safety kind of like
Mm.
decision. It's also a very like economic decision. It's a environmental decision. So like I think these are definitely like really big topics that require, I guess, leadership from more
Yeah.
like influential people or like people who are more um educated in these fields than us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I absolutely agree. I just feel like, yeah, it's not up to me. It's up to the policymakers. And if to build it, I can see the pros and cons for doing that. And I do feel like, yeah, Professor David McKay and also Professor Thomas Rose and Trevor Sweeting, they all made really good points about why we should or should not have nuclear energy. And that's all I know. Like there's nothing much I can do. So yeah, I think it's great for us to spend this time and discuss about the latest technology and sustainable energy, renewable energy, as well as, non-renewable energy and how they, you know, intersects with our individual behavior, how it intersects with, companies and, policies. So yeah, lastly, I guess I would just like to say we did a lot of research for this series, and a lot of these information are inspired in this episode is inspired by the two courses that I took about sustainability in university, energy systems in the sustainable world, and also the book without sustainable energy without the hot air, as well as environmental science course. And with all of the research information that I found, I would just attach all of those links in the description. So if you're interested, feel free to check it out. And yeah, I guess that's it for this episode of the special series Sustainability. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the Uncommon Senses.